Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching SDTV. Climate has taken the world very fast, and I think the time to adjust and readjust and find new policy is very little. In fact, if I say that all this we have to do in real time, that would not be wrong. So there are certain organizations and people at the center of the organizations who are doing extraordinary work to bring the globe to the common destination, which is a change. We have to adopt to the changing climate. We cannot do it. Mitigation for that, adaptation, and all that. So the damage is reduced. We can pin the rising global temperature at a place where it is still before the level where it can go down the precipice, and all that happens which is which is not acceptable for the humanity as a common future. So to understand how we do that, how to finance the climate on that, and what actions globally are required, we have today with us a very learned person who has academic background, and she hands on the subject day in and day out. She sleeps with these ideas, and during the daytime she works them out. So we have brought to you Julia Skorupska of PPCA, head of the mission. Julia, very warm welcome.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so please say something on as a basic premise of on I've just said, and we can rumble on from there in the form of a discussion.
So the Paris Coal Alliance, which is the organization I work with, brings together governments and financial organizations and businesses to think about how can we accelerate the transition from coal to clean. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because I think it is really clear across the world that one of the most important things we can do to prevent the worst impacts of climate change, but also one of the most important things we can do to build the foundations for long-term economic prosperity, is to transition our energy systems from coal to cleaner forms of power. But at the same time, we recognize that especially in emerging economies, this is really challenging. That coal power plants are young, there are lots of debts to be paid off, demand for energy is growing fast, there are communities that are dependent on coal. So we see our role as being to bring together the people who are working on this transition to try and come up with solutions to how to address these challenges. So how can we work together to help countries like Pakistan move towards a cleaner energy system, which will, in the long term, build economic prosperity?
At the nerve center of the policymakers in countries like Pakistan, which are very indebted already, very high debt, they fear that the climate action might increase their debt burden. Do you think there are some instruments or the ways and the pathways through which we can rumble on the pathway for climate change without adding that pile?
Yeah, there we're starting with the challenge, which I agree is really significant in emerging economies like Pakistan, and maybe just to also reiterate the opportunities. So the use of coal in Pakistan is now a big financial strain on the economy. 60% of coal is imported, the price of coal is rising. And at the same time, Pakistan has amazing renewable potential and is developing a great solar and wind energy. So you're kind of left with the drag on the economy of still using coal, which is extremely expensive, still having to pay very high capacity payments, so payments to the power plants, even if they're not actually being used. So this is why it feels like it's a problem which is worth trying to solve. How can we stop having to pay this money for electricity, which is more expensive and often we're not using? But obviously, as you say, there are debts in Pakistan, there are debts around the coal power plants, there are real costs in working out how to retire them, how to make sure those debts are paid off, and that the contracts are wound down. And I mean, I think the good news is, yes, there are ways now which are being developed to support countries to address that problem. So around about 18 months ago, we started working with the governments of France and Indonesia, who decided that they wanted to bring together a group of governments and finance, so public and private finance, in what they called a coal transition commission, to try and address this problem of how to support emerging economies transition from without increasing their debt burden. And we've seen over that period that there are a number of places in which this is happening. There are a number of pilot projects. And so there are some people who are thinking about ways to use private finance to address this challenge. And so in the Philippines, there was a company that sold their coal power plant to investors who were able to say, because we're closing this down, we can access a lower cost of capital, and so we can shorten the debts. Another way of doing it is what's happened in Chile. So they've used concessional finance to have a results-based loan. So what happens there is, yes, there is a loan to build a new renewables energy plant, but the cost of that loan is reduced because at the same time they're closing coal power plants. And so that's a way of making sure that there's not more debt being added. Another really exciting mechanism which is being looked at is transition credits. So that's where people pay for the reduction in emissions. So it's possible to monetize the value of how much you're reducing the emissions by closing the coal power plant. And those haven't been used yet, but their development is kind of advancing. And it looks like in the Philippines will be the first place where they'll be used to close the coal power plant in the Philippines. And so those, I think, are some of the kind of exciting ways in which it looks like people are developing new ways of supporting the countries to close down coal power plants.
When we say West, which is the developed part, Greater West, automatically US and the Europe comes to your mind. $20 trillion Europe and about $28 trillion US. Do you think that the withdrawal of the US from the climate action, especially Article 6 and all some of them, has dented this effort greatly, or at least it has thrown a spanner in the good work that you are preaching and doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree with you that there's been a big shift in politics over the last few months. And I think that we're all still trying to work out exactly where things settle. What does this mean for all of our work? But I think that on this particular area of work, trying to support countries to transition from coal to clean, my sense is that the momentum is not diminished. And that's because there's such a strong fundamental economic case. So the IMF has said for every dollar that we invest in transitioning from coal to clean, there'll be a $3 return in terms of social and economic benefit. And because that case is so clear, I think that we see that countries remain committed to doing this. Maybe the tone and the frame will be, but the work doesn't stop. And I was in Singapore last week talking to some of the people who are financing coal to clean transitions. And I was really struck that the work is continuing. We saw the publication of a framework for using transition credits. So that's a really landmark step, which kind of sets out, this is how these can be used. And we also saw more businesses stepping forward to say that they want to be part of this action in the Philippines where a coal power plant will be closed down.
So, there had been certain thinking that if somebody says the developed world, which has developed at a time when there was this fossil fuel was very abundant and without any consideration to climate, they were freely using it. Now they have developed. So if they present something like some debt swap or some sort of a reduction in debt or debt swap for climate action, do you think this sort of an instrument can be presented or doled out to the countries which you think should do this mitigation work?
So I think that the mechanisms which we're seeing develop to support coal to clean transitions are showing that there are ways to support the transition. So some of them are using concessional finance. For example, the Asian Development Bank has been involved in supporting transitions from coal to clean in Indonesia, in the Philippines, and I understand is also looking in Pakistan at developing a mechanism to support the transition from coal to clean. So I think that there is finance available alongside the concessional finance. As I say, it seems like there are a number of private investors who remain very keen on investing in this area. And it looks like there are new innovative financial tools like transition credits, which will allow kind of Pakistan to benefit from reducing emissions. I think the flip side of that is, what does it take to mobilize this finance? How to make sure that it comes here? As I say, it seems to me there is finance available, people are looking for projects. But as with all investments, people need there to be the right enabling environment. And what does that look like? So people who are going to invest in the transition want to know that there is certainty about the direction of travel. And so they want to know that there's a plan in Pakistan for how this will be delivered, and that the government has thought through what the kind of steps are, and that if they invest, the money will make a difference. They'll also want to know that there's going to be a positive kind of environmental impact from their investments and positive social impacts. So has what will happen to the communities been thought about? And is it the case that there is a commitment not to build new coal power plants in Pakistan? And then finally, kind of one of the things that investors look for is there a level playing field for renewables? So it feels like that's something which really makes a difference in terms of reducing the costs of transition. And that's something which already seems to be in place in a relatively kind of strong way in Pakistan through initiatives like the alternative and renewable energy policy. So I think that kind of the key thing is, yes, there is financing available at the moment for people who want to move forward with this. And there are certain key steps that can be taken to kind of demonstrate that we're ready, we would like to move forward with this. And that's around having clear plans around how the transition will take place and what will happen to communities through the transition. And the upcoming renewal of nationally determined contributions, so the NDCs, is a really great opportunity to set out that this is the Pakistan plan for transition.
Are there some structured instruments on financing and all that, as a not as a bait, but I mean good projects which you think can be made available to Pakistan just to rumble on, to pursue Pakistan to adopt the course?
Yes, definitely. So as I say, there are a number of initiatives which are led by multilateral development banks to support work in this area. The Asian Development Bank has done a lot of work in this area, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, and I understand has also done a pre-feasibility study in Pakistan and would be able to support Pakistan and bring in private finance around this. So I think there are structured instruments, and obviously there would need to be a kind of process of thinking about what would work best in the Pakistani context. I see there's already been a lot of research done around kind of which coal power plants could be looked at first, what sort of structures might work. But that's also something that an organization like ours could help with, and to help bring the right kind of experts together. But I think the key thing is to demonstrate that this is something, if it is something which the government of Pakistan wants, for them to demonstrate that it's something which they would like to see go forward. And the way to do that is, as I say, to be clear around, this is a priority for us, this is the transition plan, we're committed not to building new coal, and we've kind of thought through what the steps would be to deliver this, and this is the support we need.
Right. For less for practitioners, but more for the policy framers and the policy community and the research community, would you, just to sum up at the fag end of this program, some of the priority actions for green finance which must be taken now so we can build upon them later on them?
Definitely. So I think that my key message is that yes, globally, we need there to be more green finance, but at the moment, there is finance available for the first movers. The way in which to kind of signal and encourage people to invest is to be really clear around the government commitment and the fact that the government has its own plan for delivering this. So the NDC, which will be updated this year, is a prime opportunity for the government of Pakistan to set out what it would like to see happen, what it sees as an ambitious plan for transition in Pakistan, and what support it would need to have to deliver that. And to include in that NDC things like a commitment to not building new coal, which really clearly signals investors that we're serious about this, we're committed to the transition, and as long as there is the support available, we have a plan for moving forward.
Julia, thank you very much for participating in this program and making yourself available for this program and this for recording. I thank you for that. And the message is very clear that ultimately the world has to adopt that through mitigation and then adopt. There can be no two options. Climate we have to adopt, but if you do it sooner, that is in interest of the all. Simultaneously, when the consumer society and the consumerism is polluting the world, there are people and the organizations who are working diligently to save the common future of this planet. I think we must listen to them. And if at the surface it seems difficult, we must, through consultation, find a pathway to deliver through and have some conduit on that. With this, we come to the end of the program. I thank my guest again, and bye for now.